Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to stories that matter here on the North Fork of Long Island, and sometimes far beyond. Some of our guests are rooted here by generations. Others join us from elsewhere to share their work, their perspective, or their connection to this community, but all bring something that resonates, something that adds to the ongoing conversation. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 160, we sit down with Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney, whose roots on Long Island run deep, and whose career in law enforcement has spanned both state and federal levels. From his early days as an Assistant U.S. attorney prosecuting complex cases of organized crime, narcotics, and violent offenses, to his current role as Suffolk County Chief Prosecutor, his career has been distinguished by a commitment to justice, professional accountability, and the protection of the public. Since taking office in 2022, he has launched new initiatives such as the Violent Criminal Enterprise Bureau, the Gilgo Serial Homicide Task Force, and the community outreach programs, addressing everything from elder fraud to school safety. In this conversation, we explore his journey from his Long Island roots to high-profile cases, his approach to balancing justice and fairness, and his vision for the future of public safety in Suffolk County. So I hope you enjoy episode 160 with District Attorney Ray Tierney. This episode was recorded May 21st, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. It's really an honor to have you on today.
No, not at all. My pleasure to be out here. Very interesting. I enjoyed the little tour.
Thank you. And so could you give us a little introduction about yourself, where you were born and raised?
Sure. So my name is Ray Tierney. I'm the Suffolk County DA, and I was born in Brooklyn. My parents are originally from Brooklyn, and then after they moved out to Massapequa. We lived in Massapequa. I have 4 older sisters, and then I was born, given the number, and now all of a sudden they had a new sex in the family. They had to move, had to get a bigger house, so they moved from Massapequa, and we moved out to Comac.
Oh, okay.
And then I lived in Comac, through college and law school. And so other than college and law school, I lived in Suffolk County in Comac my whole life. And then I moved out to Brookhaven once I got married.
Okay. And then in terms of just you mentioned Brooklyn with your parents, but how far back does your ancestry go in New York, or can you trace it even further back?
Well, we have a Tierney family Bible, so that's very helpful. So, I think James Tierney was born in Ireland in 1835, and he came at some point, I want to say around the Civil War, maybe a little bit earlier. He came to this country. He had 3 brothers. Frank Tierney was the brother he had 3 sons. And then, so I was the ancestor of Frank Tierney. That was my great grandfather, and he was a police inspector for the NYPD. He was appointed inspector by President Roosevelt.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he had a son, Raymond, and then that Raymond Tierney, he became a judge, and then my father, Raymond Tierney II, school was not his thing. He was a football player. He got a football scholarship to the University of Wyoming, got thrown out of college, went into the military, was a military policeman. And then me, Ray Tierney III, and I have a son, Ray Tierney IV.
Wow. So you have law enforcement goes throughout.
Yeah, I think it's typical, and I think a lot of Irish families, and I think my family was probably very it's very typical in that sense that it was law enforcement. The Tierney family was they settled in San Francisco and in New York, and my particular wing, the Frank Tierney wing, we were at least initially law enforcement.
Okay, and you mentioned, did you grow up more as a child in Comac?
Yeah, I was like the deal breaker, and as far as the size of the house in Massapequa went. So very early after I don't have a recollection, but I was sharing. I think it was 3 sisters in one room, and then my oldest sister and me in another room, and I was in the crib. And I used to throw the bottle at my sister to wake her up when I wanted to get out of the crib, or so I've been told. But so that was brief, and then I don't have any recollection of the Massapequa house, but then the Comac house was where I grew up with my parents and my 4 sisters.
Okay. And how was your experience growing up in that area, or just in Long Island in general?
I think for that time period, I'm 59, and so I think that for that time period, it was very typical. I look back at my childhood in Comac with extreme fondness. It was a great place to live. It was old. I think it was a peach farm. And when I first moved in, there was a giant farmhouse next to me. And I remember one day they came and they burnt it down, which I thought was, as a little kid, was very exciting. But it was a new neighborhood, and the good thing about moving into a new neighborhood is most of the families who come in are young, and so we had the Fuscos, the Leathermans, and these families with we had 5 kids, we had families with those many kids or more, and always baseball games, football games, hide and go seek, pools, just a great place to grow up. We sort of, we didn't have internet or tablets, and my mom basically said, get out of the house. And we went out, and I was given a curfew, and I basically stayed within the confines of the neighborhood. And I could remember coming home, choking down my food as fast as possible so I could go back out and play. It was a great, I had a great childhood, and one of the things that it was a very safe childhood. So we try to make sure that all of our communities in Suffolk County could benefit from a safe environment.
Yes. And also, what about your time in school? How was that experience, even going through middle school and high school? If you had any favorite classes or subjects that you enjoyed?
Sure. So I was a big English and history guy. I think when I was younger, I remember my older sisters, they would come home, they had Animal Farm, and I read Animal Farm when I was I want to say like first grade, because I saw the book and it had animals on it. And I said, oh, that's interesting. But I remember always wanting to, I remember seeing my sisters read and always wanting to read, always wanting to catch up to my sisters. So I especially liked history and English. Those were my 2 favorite subjects, always.
And were you big into sports, played football? Yeah,
so my whole family, my sisters were great athletes. My sisters were my heroes. They were all like great athletes, and they were really good. And when I was younger, I wasn't that good, but I always knew that I'd probably end up being at least decent, because I said, how could my sisters be so good? I mean, I have to at least be decent. So as I got older, I got more into it. But we very active household. All my sisters played a bunch of sports. I ran track. I played basketball. I played baseball. And I played football. Those were my main sports, and I loved every one of them. Played for the PAL, played for the church, played for the school. It was again a lot of fun.
And coming out of high school, did you know what you wanted to do as a career?
No, not at all. I remember. So I ran track and I played football. Those are the 2 sports I played in high school. And I remember, so my junior year, I hurt my knee, so I really didn't have much of a junior year at all. And so then my senior year, I played, and I remember after the season was over, I was sick. And I it was like to that point where, you have to start thinking about school. I had done pretty well in school, did pretty well in the SATs. So, but I was like, what next, you know? And I remember I was sick. And then when I came back to school, I got called down to the guidance office. And that one day that I was sick, a bunch of football recruiters had visited the school and asked to speak to me. So it was Harvard, Brown, and I think Yale. And for whatever reason, they all came on the same day, the day that I wasn't there. And then all of a sudden I said, maybe I have an opportunity to continue playing football in college. So that's what I did. I ended up going to Brown University and playing football there.
And in terms of knowing what you wanted to get into in college, when did you find out that you were really interested in law enforcement and just getting into that type of career, I guess?
Yeah, so it was interesting, and I guess the way we introduced it kind of makes sense now, because I had done well in school. I had this like sort of law enforcement background. So when I was in school, and teachers would say, "Oh, you're good at writing, and you're good at reading. You should think about being a lawyer." And when I was a kid, my concept of what being a lawyer was, you're a prosecutor. You go in, you keep the community safe, you prosecute crimes. So I had that very immature thought about what lawyers do. Of course, lawyers could do just about anything, but to me, that's all a lawyer did. You were the guy who prosecuted cases. So I always had that in the back of my mind. And then when I went to school, and I said, I'll probably end up going to law school, it was for the specific purpose of being a prosecutor. That thought and that desire never really left me, even though as I got older and got more sophisticated and understood there was a lot of other things out there, that always held my interest.
And so you had an extensive career in law spanning both state and federal levels. Can you share what initially, I guess, how you began your journey in Suffolk County, or did it start out even later?
So I went to law school. I went to St. John's. So I went to law school in Queens. I was living in Queens, other than Rhode Island with Brown and Queens with St. John's. I always lived on Long Island. You start to think about jobs, and I wanted to be a prosecutor. So I applied to just about every prosecutor's office on the East Coast. At that time, we were going through a recession, and there weren't a lot of jobs. But somehow I managed to get a job in the county that I grew up in, Suffolk County. So I was a prosecutor in Suffolk County. I left for a short period of time in private practice. I didn't like it. Went back. But all told, I was prosecuting the DA's office for about 14 and a half years. Then I left the Suffolk County DA's office to become a federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of New York. I was a federal prosecutor for about 11 and a half years. And then from there, I worked in the Brooklyn DA's office as an executive assistant district attorney. I ran a couple of their bureaus, like their violent crimes and their gang bureaus. And after that, I got the opportunity to run for office. And so I ran for Suffolk DA and became DA in 2022.
Yes. And I think you mentioned you served as Assistant U.S. Attorney and overseeing complex investigations, including white-collar crimes, international narcotics, and violent crimes. How did that experience shape your approach to your current role as District Attorney of Suffolk County?
Yeah, I think all my stops along the way, played a significant role, and I'm very grateful that I was able to have just about 30 years in law enforcement before becoming a DA, because not only did I get a lot of great experiences, but I also got to meet a lot of great people and bring them onto the job with me. But specifically with regard to my work as a federal prosecutor, it's just really, big, significant cases. So I did the Colombian, the Norte Valle Colombian drug cartel boss case, where we extradited him from Colombia, and he lived in the mansion in the jungle with the landing strip in the backyard, and moving 80 tons of cocaine into the United States. Working with paramilitary organizations to make the cocaine and then to transport it out of the jungle into the river. From the river, went out to the fast boats, and then it went either through the Caribbean or through the the Caribbean into the Atlantic or the Pacific coast into our country. So that was really a fascinating case. I did that. I did MS-13 cases. All told, I investigated or prosecuted about 68 MS-13 murders that occurred on Long Island. I did political corruption cases. I did big white collar cases. So it was a great experience. You get to meet all the various law enforcement agencies. And so it was really an enjoyable part of my career and very helpful because you get to, on all the stops I had, whether it was federal or state, you get to, pick pieces and best practices. So that's what, I've always tried to do.
And you mentioned your years as a prosecutor and worked on these high-profile cases involving gangs and organized crime. What lessons from those cases have you applied in addressing crimes here in Suffolk County?
Well, I think the one thing I learned is there's no such thing as a big case or a little case. They're just cases. And if you're doing it, it's a big case. So you have to, within reason, you have to use all the resources available to you to enhance your case and to make sure that you prosecute your cases. First and foremost, you want to keep people safe. And the reason why you do these cases is to protect people. So you got to do that externally. You got to protect the community, but internally, you got to protect your witnesses. You got to protect your police officers. You got to protect your lay witnesses, and make sure. In other words, if you're doing a case with a gang case, you got what is your plan for after? How are you going to keep people safe? How are you going to make sure that there's no retribution for testimony or whatever? So I think the one thing I learned is this is a serious business and you have to take a comprehensive look, and you can't be myopic. You can't say, okay, we're going to do this on day one, and then we don't care what happens on day two. You got to say, this is the case. We're going to put this case together. We're going to try to make a big conspiracy. We're going to hold everyone responsible, not just like if it's a shooting case, not just the shooter, the person who drove him there, the person who planned it, the person who lured the victim to the area of the shooting, the boss who ordered the shooting to begin with. You want to do all those things, and then in the aftermath, you want to make sure everybody's safe.
And then, since becoming district attorney in 2022, you've established several specialized units, including the Violent Criminal Enterprise Bureau and the Gilgo Serial Homicide Task Force. Could you walk us through your decision and the process behind making these initiatives?
Sure. So I think one of the things that a federal case, we talked about being a federal prosecutor and you do big cases. And the one thing about being a federal prosecutor is you don't have primary jurisdiction. The primary jurisdiction is with the state. So it would be the Suffolk County Police Department primarily and the Suffolk County DA's office. But as a federal prosecutor, you could go out and you could do those organized crime cases. You could do those Colombian cartel cases because you have the jurisdiction, and there's a significant federal interest in seeing those type of cases get prosecuted. So it's more of a macro view. As a state prosecutor, and this is what I learned in the Brooklyn DA's office, you have primary jurisdiction over everything that happens in your case. So I ran the crime strategies unit in the Brooklyn DA's office. And there you look at what's happening in your communities. What are the crimes? How are people being hurt? How are our businesses being hurt? What are the crimes? And then you come up with a strategy to address specifically what's happening in the communities, whether it's violent crime or property crime or economic crime or elder crime, whatever it may be. So if you see that there's a need for something, you address it. So with regard to, violent criminal enterprises, I felt that with regard to our street gang prosecutions, that in Suffolk County, they hadn't really been prosecuting street gang cases like blood, Crip cases, MS-13 cases like we prosecuted in Brooklyn or in the federal system. So we wanted to take that comprehensive look that I've been talking about, that it's just not usually the violence that occurs from street gangs is there's two gangs and they're rivals and they each control a specific geographic area. And then to assert dominance, they go into each other's territory and basically do drive-by shooting. So, if it's the 2nd Street gang, the 5th Street gang, 2nd Street gang goes to the 5th Street, commits a drive-by shooting, goes back. 5th Street says, okay, we're going to retaliate. And then you have this tit for tat violence that goes back and forth, back and forth. It's obviously dangerous for the gang members, but also for members of the community. So what you want to do is you want to take those individuals, the very small percentage of the population that's driving the violence, you want to take them off the street as soon as possible. And you also don't want to just take the shooters, as I've been saying, all of the co-conspirators, all the people responsible for the violence, you want to take off the street. So that's what the Violent Criminal Enterprises Bureau was designed to do, is have our prosecutors work with our investigators on the state, federal, and local level to make sure that we're comprehensively addressing these issues. So if there's 2 gangs that are holding sway in an area, and you go in and for every criminal act, there's, 7 or 8 people responsible. If you only take one person off, you're really not having an effect. But if you prosecute all of those individuals who are responsible for violence, the effect will be more profound on the community. And that's what you want. So that's why we did VCE with regard to the Gilgo Beach Task Force. Obviously, there was the Gilgo Beach homicides that had been unsolved since 2010. We were able to come in and working with our partners, have relook at it, have a comprehensive look, use some new technology, look at some of the old things that they had done, and again, bring in all of the partners. So everyone because everybody sort of had a piece of that investigation, but they weren't really speaking. So when we came together, we brought everybody together. We were able to look at the evidence, develop new evidence, and then come up with the result. And so we try to do that with all of our cases, and that's why the cold case unit is another. There's a lot of unsolved homicides, so we want to address that. So
I want to come back to the Gilgo Beach investigation, but I had another question, because you've emphasized ethical and accountable law enforcement. How do you balance maintaining strong law enforcement practices with ensuring that the legal system remains fair and just for all individuals?
Yeah, I think it comes back to accountability, and I think that you always have to tell yourself, and this is with regard to not having that myopic view, or this is a bad person, or somebody who did a bad thing, and we need to, no matter what, we need to make sure that there's an arrest. You have to take a comprehensive look at it, but you also have to understand you have to be able to defend everything you do. So, and then after it's all done, you have to go out back into the same communities and explain yourself and say, look, this is what we did. This is why we did what we did. Does anybody have any questions? And so as the district attorney, you occupy a unique place in the hierarchy because, I'm a politician. I'm in law enforcement, but I'm also asked to police both politicians and other members of law enforcement. So that's a balance that you have to strike, and you have to maintain that independence where you have to make sure that people understand that if there is a violation of law, there will be ramifications for it. So we try to do that.
Yes, and then you mentioned the Gilgo Beach investigation, which is one of the notable cases under your leadership. What can you share about the progress made by the task force, and how does that work fit into the broader vision of the safety of Suffolk County? Sure.
I mean, I think, when you look at that was a campaign issue when I ran, because, what's happening with Gilgo? What are you going to do with Gilgo? And I said, at the time, I said, look, we're going to take a comprehensive look at it. We're going to do a task force model, bring everybody in to examine the evidence. And, for those of the listeners who don't know about the Gilgo Beach case, there were 10 bodies were found on Gilgo Beach in western Suffolk. And so we were, and they were found the first bodies were found in 2010. So ever since that time, the crimes had gone unsolved. So using this task force model, working with our partners, we took a comprehensive look at it, and we were able to charge one individual with 7 homicides spanning from 1993 to 2010. Out of those 7 homicides, 6 of the bodies or portions of the bodies were found on Gilgo. One victim, Sandra Castilla, who was the first victim from 1993. Her body was found in Northampton, out on the East End. So again, it's that comprehensive look using all of the evidence possible. And so the Gilgo model, that case is not a one-off. That's how we do all of our cases. And the way law enforcement and criminal investigations and prosecutions have evolved is, as you know, we live in an incredibly digital age. So if, and all of this evidence, there's advances in forensics, and there's advances with computers, and so say today, if you were to say, like I had a press conference, a little bit up the island about the East End, and then I came out here, and then talking to you, and then I'll go back to the West End and Hauppauge, and I'll go to my office, there's a digital footprint that exists, and you could see, all of the things I did, but that digital footprint, although it exists, it doesn't exist forever, and it disappears quite quickly. So what we try to do is, as soon as possible, we try to get and in order to obtain that information, you need subpoenas and search warrants. So if we have our ADAs working with our investigators, pretty much like, say, if there's a shooting, if a person goes from one town, goes into another town with 4 other individuals, commits a shooting, and then goes back, right? If you, as soon as that happens, if you start working, you could get the ballistics, you could get the cartridges or the casings that are left at the scene. You could ballistically tie them to another gun, another incident. You could get people's cell phones. You could get their cell site locations. You could get infotainment systems and GPS systems from cars. So you could seize those cars. You could get that information. You could get license plate readers. There's DNA and other forensic evidence that you can get. There's video, there's social media. So if there's communication back and forth, you can get that. But all of this stuff, it's out there, but it doesn't exist forever. So you have to work at it immediately and go out and try to get it. So those are the things that we did, and then we've done in Gilgo, but we do it in all of our cases.
And can that even help within other unsolved cases from Suffolk County from in the past?
Yeah, so that's why we did the cold case unit, because we wanna look at that. Financial records, right? So if you have a cell phone and your cell phone is indicating that you're in a particular location, and then we look at financial records and your financial records are there, right? And then we look at your social media. Hey, going to Manhattan today. Then we look at video. We see that you used you made a particular purchase at a particular store. Well, then go get the video.
Yes.
But all that stuff doesn't exist forever. So that's what we did. And then there's forensic evidence, and that's always advancing. So one of the things we did in Gilgo, which has never had been done before in New York State, is we obtained a nuclear DNA profile from a hair shaft.
Wow.
And we're currently litigating that because that had never been done before. So, all of these things that we've done, we're doing prospectively, but with our cold case unit, we wanted to look back retrospectively and say, okay, let's use all of these methods that we now have and see if we could solve some of these older cases.
And you've also placed emphasis on community outreach and initiatives like job fairs and school safety summits and seminars on elder fraud. How do you view the role of the district attorney's office in engaging with the community beyond the courtroom?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And when I ran as a federal prosecutor, I was never a member of a political party, and I never got involved in the political process. And as a federal prosecutor, you do serious cases, you do public corruption cases, so you kind of want to be apart from everything. So, during those 12 years or so that I was a federal prosecutor, I was very much apart from the community. So then when I ran, I got involved. I saw all of these various community groups and all the great things that people do in their community. And really, I said, wow, this is great. And I really need, when I become DA, I really need to make sure that we're being good community partners. Number one, because we should be, role models and leaders in our various communities. But number two, as we've been talking about the DA's office, there's a lot of things that people assume that the DA's office does, but there's also a lot of things that people don't realize that we do. So we wanted to go out in the community, explain ourselves to the community, and explain all the services that we have to offer. And part and parcel with that is as you engage and prosecute, investigate crimes, you realize, okay, there's a component to public safety, which is prosecuting these cases, but there's also a education component to it too. So in the instances of elder fraud, you see elderly or vulnerable communities, whether it's your elderly or your immigrant communities, they're being targeted by criminal organizations to try to steal their money or exploit them in some way, shape, or form. So you want to educate those communities and say, hey, listen, be careful, watch out for this. Like this is, if people contact you via the phone or the computer, be skeptical. If they say your computer's broken, click on this link. Don't click on this link. If you get an email from your bank and they say, hey, there's a problem with your account, click on this link and we could fix it. No. Back out of that and call your bank from another device and say, hey, is there something wrong with my account? So there's education systems. And of course, another vulnerable community is of our young people. So with regard to fentanyl and the dangers of fentanyl, with regard to human trafficking and gangs and all manner of distracted and impaired driving, we want to be good community partners and do the outreach. So hopefully we could prevent people from being victimized to begin with. That's the best part, right? It's good to prosecute cases, but it's really, really good to prevent crimes from even happening so there are no victims.
Yes. And then Suffolk County, it faces its share of challenges, including concerns over gang violence and drug crimes, domestic abuse. How do you work with other law enforcement agencies to address this issue, whether with the sheriff or on town levels or even in the local levels here?
So it's really important, and they're my partners. They're also my eyes and ears. When I was a federal prosecutor, I was all the way high up in the air, and even as a state prosecutor, you're above the ground. But the people on the ground, the people in the communities, and the police officers who patrol those areas. And so they have the information. So you want to get, first and foremost, you want to get the information from them, and you want to make sure everyone's comfortable giving you the information. That's another reason why community outreach is so important. But the other thing is, I can't be effective without the help of our partners. So when we talk about our partners in Suffolk County, I think I'm blessed to have great partners. Suffolk County PD. Kevin Catalina is the commissioner. He does a great job. Our county executive, Ed Romaine, very, very supportive and very helpful to me. Our Suffolk County Sheriff, Errol Toulon, great partner. And with the jails are a great clearinghouse of information. So they're integral to our investigations. New York State Police, again, extremely helpful. And then we have all our various East End jurisdictions. And I can tell you that when I started, the relationship between the Suffolk County PD and our East End law enforcement agencies, police departments, was not the best. I think it's gone great. Credit to them. They do a great job. And so we've increased that communication because, again, if you don't talk to those agencies on the East End, how are you going to know what's going on? So that's been very helpful. And so that's really on the state and local level. And then on the federal level, having been a federal prosecutor, I do have relationships there. And our federal partners are enormously helpful as well and have proven to be so since I've been in office. So it's I'm one person. I have 245 attorneys. I have about 100 investigators. So that's just in my office. So I need a great internal team, but I also need all these external parts as well.
I was just curious with some drug cases or with fentanyl, have you seen a decrease in that in terms of cases being brought up, or is that still a challenge?
It's a challenge. So just to orient you, last year in Suffolk County, we had 16 homicides. So that's obviously those are 16 too many deaths. But in a county with a population of 1.5 million, 16 homicides in a year is very low. And statistically speaking, Suffolk County is the safest as far as violent crime goes, by far the safest big county in New York State, which we're very proud of. So we do a good job with that. But then when you look at the opioid earlier it was up above 500, 525. It's gone down. Last year we had a significant reduction, about 400, still too much, a little over 400, way too much. This year it's gotten even better, and I think that it's becoming more difficult for the fentanyl to come into the community, which is going to be helpful. So it's a significant problem. It's getting a little bit better, but we have to still be vigilant. And again, that is the fentanyl, the opioid overdose crisis. That's where we have to have aggressive law enforcement. You also have to have education, outreach, and you have to have counseling service, mental health treatment, and substance abuse treatment for people who are unfortunately addicted to opioids. And it's a significant problem here on Long Island, in New York State, across the country, and it's something that we have to take a comprehensive look at.
Yes. And I know I think you've talked about bail reform, the New York's bail reform laws, and have been critical of those. Can you explain the specific ways you've seen the reform negatively impact the public safety in Suffolk County, and what changes you believe are most urgently needed?
Sure, and I think it was, I want to say, around 2018 where we had New York State so-called criminal justice reform, and I think anytime you want to reform a system, that's welcome, and any system, especially our criminal justice system, could use reform. I think it just has to be smart. And I think when they did the reform, the pendulum was a little bit too far to the right, and then they swung it all the way too far to the left. So I think with a few common sense adjustments, I think we could really improve our criminal justice system and our public safety. And my main problem with the law is it substitutes the expertise of the people, the lawyers, the litigants, the prosecutors, the judge. Their expertise is being taken out of the equation, and we're substituting in the so-called expertise of our legislature. And so now the legislature dictates when you could ask for bail, when you can't ask for bail, or certain other things. And that's a problem. So for instance, there are certain crimes that we can't ask for bail on no matter what. We also can't argue dangerousness. We can only argue risk of flight. And I can tell you as a prosecutor, when we arrest someone, our main concern is, if this person gets out, or is he or she going to harm someone? And if the answer to that question is yes, that concerns us greatly. If the question is probably not or no, well then we're a lot less concerned about bail. So we should be able to argue dangerousness. We're able to argue dangerousness in the federal system. The overwhelming majorities of state jurisdictions, you could argue dangerousness. So we should be able to argue dangerousness. And if a person is a danger to the community, and we can prove that, we should be able to ask for bail, because otherwise you get absurd results. And there was one case where there was a body part case out in Western Suffolk, and what had happened were there were three couples, and these three couples go into a house. No one can see inside the house, and two couples come out, and then the third couple comes out in pieces because they've been chopped up. And then what happens is those two couples then go out and strew the body parts throughout the town of Babylon. We get the case. We make the arrest, right? And we now have, because there's video and other things, we could see, them unlawfully disposing of a body, which is a crime, which is a felony. But because it's not on this designated list, we can't ask for bail, so they get out. And there was a lot of outrage with this. Now, what we did was we took our time. We were able to charge the appropriate case, including murder, and eventually the individuals went back into jail. But at the onset, it's a problem. And so again, because you can't argue dangerousness, there's also certain crimes so if grand larcenies, you can't ask for bail. So if you have an individual, say an individual from outside the country, and he's using the computer to steal from our Suffolk County community members, and say for whatever reason he's traveling, and they catch him at Kennedy Airport and they arrest him and they bring him to Suffolk County to arraign, you can't ask for bail. So what you're going to do is you're going to arraign him. He's going to get on that plane. He's going to go back to his country, and you're never going to get him again. So these are absurd results. And the reason why they're absurd and they don't work is because the legislature has decided to substitute their judgment for the judgment of the people in the court. And they're setting, like all these scenarios that I just talked about, the legislature can't address every single scenario in a law because, there's so many different permutations. So a serial killer could get caught driving without a license. So you can't ask for bail. So you should be able to, but if you could argue dangerousness, you can make that argument, and then the appropriate thing could still happen. So that's just one example of where I think a few common sense tweaks to the law could go a long way in improving the system.
And yeah, I think you get a lot of, I think we saw that even during COVID, a lot of repeat offenders and release and having to bring them back in and then release. And then have you even seen, even in San Francisco, I think theirs is even more of a far-reaching with their bail reform, where usually they, I think their district attorney is very lenient.
Yeah, the district attorney in the former district attorney in
San
Francisco, he was recalled by the electorate because he basically said there were certain crimes that he's just not going to prosecute. Which again, I would never say as an absolute matter, because there's so many different factors go into it. I would never say that when it comes to crime I would always prosecute it, or B, I would never prosecute it, because it's just you're setting yourself up for failure, because so many different things could play into that. So yeah, so that one of the things is there's a lot of prosecutors' offices who come up with these policies where they're going to decarcerate or not prosecute. We don't do that in Suffolk County. We don't have strict. We take every case on an individual basis. But the other thing is, like with bail reform in our, and it was exacerbated during COVID, of course, because a lot of the courts were closed down. But, one of the bad things about bail reform is not only can we not ask for bail, but also oftentimes a police officer can't even make an arrest. So in other words, if there's a person in a community that, they're getting a lot of community complaints because they're doing some like repetitive misdemeanor crime type activity, when the police are called, the police can't even make it. So basically they issue a ticket, they give the ticket to the person, and then they go away, and the person, invariably goes right back to doing whatever it was that they were doing before. But once they get that appearance ticket, it's called, they're given a court date. They're given a time to appear to court for a later court date. But if they don't go to that court date under our new law, we still can't ask for a warrant. Then the judge says, okay, well, you want a warrant? Okay, well then go out, find this person, invite them back to court, and then the second time they're invited back to court and they decline our invitation, then you could ask for a warrant.
Okay.
So what you're doing is you're incentivizing a person who's charged with a crime, just don't show up, right? And then you're putting a tremendous burden on the prosecution, because we if we don't show good due diligence in searching for those people, the case could get dismissed. So we have to go out and find all those people. So the amount of resources law enforcement has to use to do that. I mean, I have a little warrant squad in my own office, because what we're doing is we're trying to go out and bring those people back into court just so we could start prosecuting them. And a consequence of the criminal justice reforms is the warrants have gone through the roof.
Yes. And also, as part of your office's mission, you formed the Beast and Heat units to address animal cruelty and hate crimes and human trafficking. Why are these issues important to you personally, and how do you see these initiatives contributing to a safer community?
Yeah, so beast and heat, that's human trafficking, hate crimes and environmental crimes and animal crimes. And so an interesting thing about being a DA, obviously in a government bureaucracy, your budget is always in place for the year prior. So when you run for office, if you win, when you take office, you don't take office, subject to your own budget. You take off, you take office subject to someone else's budget. So obviously everybody wants to do things different. So when you come in, you want to kind of remodel the office. But unlike remodeling a house, where the best thing to do is, if you're going to do a significant remodel, you move out. You remodel the house for 3 months, and then once it's gets to a certain point, you move everybody back in. Can't do that with the DA's office because you got to work every day. So our heat and beast units were a way that we could sort of remodel the office on the fly, and still prosecute cases and make sure that we don't lose anything. And so though they're concerned with human trafficking, bias crimes, hate crimes, environmental, animal crimes, and we do it. And the other thing I like about it is, fortunately, a lot of those aren't a lot of those crimes, it's not high volume crimes. So rather than have a separate unit, say like a hate crimes unit where you have 4 ADAs and 3 investigators or whatever, and there's really not, at a particular time, there's not a lot of volume in that area, so there's not a lot for them to do. We have them honing their skills on other things, and then when we get these crimes, we then are able to direct them and supervise them with these specific cases, so we could be flexible as far as how we allocate our resources dependent upon what's going on in our community. So it's been very effective, and it makes sure that these very important cases don't fall through the cracks. And first and foremost, that we have experienced, active investigators and prosecutors working them.
Yes. And then just looking back at your career, you've been honored with numerous awards, including several for your work combating gang violence. Just looking back, what achievements are you most proud of, and why?
I think that's a really tough question. I think the achievements that you're most proud of are the times that you think you made the difference. And sometimes, because a lot of times, it's the law's the law, and what's going to happen is going to happen. And which is probably the way the system should work. But every once in a while, you go home and you say, I think I did something a little bit different. And it's on those cases where you feel as though you made a little bit of a difference that you feel the best about. And one case that comes to mind, I remember there was a child abuse case, and there was a petition in family court for custody of the child. And usually ADAs don't get themselves involved in that, but we are a necessary party. So if we want to participate, we can. So I had gone to the county attorney. This was back in probably, I want to say probably about 2002 or so.
Okay.
And I told the county attorney at the time, this is the information on the case. You should make sure that these individuals don't get custody of the child. And so I was watching the hearing, and the county attorney really did not do a good job. So when the judge said, does anyone have any questions? I stood up from the back of the court and I said, I have questions. And she was like, who the heck are you? And I said, well, I'm the DA. I'm a necessary party. I'm involved in this litigation, and I want to ask questions. And she was like, okay. And I went up and I asked questions, and I cross-examined the person. And as a result, that person didn't get custody of the child. And when I was driving home that night, I said, that was a little different. And I think if I hadn't been there, it probably would have been a different result. So those types of instances, when stuff like that happens, I think those are the things that you're most proud of and most satisfied by, I guess, more importantly.
Absolutely. And then just looking ahead, what are your priorities for Suffolk County in the coming years, especially in terms of both criminal justice reform and maintaining public safety?
Well, I mean, this was a great interview, I think this is all of the things that we've been talking about. All of these issues, gang and gun violence, exploiting vulnerable communities, opioid overdose, all of these things, community outreach, education component. So, and then first and foremost, also making sure that we're doing it while we're being aggressive, we're also being fair. So all of those things going forward are a priority. And it's kind of, just the same old, just making sure that we're constantly working our cases, but we're also being careful to make sure that we're doing self-evaluations and we're doing it the right way.
Mm-hmm. And as a father of 4, how do you balance your demanding career with family life? And do your children ever ask you about your work in law enforcement?
Yeah, it's the way I balance it is my family's my refuge, and so when I'm away, I'm very different with my family than I am with the way I am professionally. Mm-hmm. And I enjoy very much my time with my family because that's the time where we're able to think about things that are not necessarily life and death. So that's kind of the way I do it. I keep the two separate and apart. And with my kids, I'll have questions. My wife will have questions. I don't like to talk about my work.
Okay.
If people ask me questions, I'll answer them, but yeah. I'm not one to like volunteer stories or anything like that because, like I said, when I'm away, I want to be away, and I don't want to be, the nicest thing about. I'm glad that my wife is not a cop or a lawyer or something like that, mm-hmm. where she would have like these pointed questions for me. I like the fact that we could go home and we could do stuff that's completely different from what I do in my job.
Yes. And then just finally, for aspiring legal professionals or community members looking to make a difference, what advice would you offer them about working in public service or particularly law enforcement?
So that's a broad question, but it's a good one. I think first and foremost, public service, there's that, and that could take so many different permutations. I think public service is great. It's such a rewarding thing. I mm-hmm. think, when we were talking about making a difference, I think I have made a difference. I think a lot of people in my line of work, regardless whether you're legal aid or prosecution or whatever you do, if you work for in governmental agency or in the public sector, you can make a difference. And that's extremely rewarding. So what I would say is, in general, like as a young person, if you get a job with the government, the greatest thing about the government is they run on the work and the brain power of young people. Mm-hmm. So by that, I mean, if you go to a law firm, and law firms have clients, and clients pay a law firm money, and they want to see a partner, a person who's been doing this for 20 years, covering their case. They don't want to see the kid just out of law school. So when you're in a law firm, you'll make good money and you'll have a great career, but you're not going to be doing, you're not going to be giving a lot of autonomy or discretion. You're basically going to be working for a partner, but in the government, we have no choice but to sort of throw you in, to train you, give you your cases, give you autonomy, give you the opportunity to do a lot of interesting and great things. So that's why it's good to work for a prosecutor's office or something like that, because as a young person, you'll get authority and experience much quicker. Mm-hmm. So that's one good thing. And you could do with that what you want. You could then go to the private sector, or you could stay in the public sector. But the best argument for staying in the public sector is you get to vindicate the rights of victims, to protect public safety, and it's a great job, and it's a very, very important one.
Yes. And then I just thought of one other question. Just because we're on the North Fork, I just wondered if you had anything you'd like to say to our listeners on the North Fork, whether about even the work you do out here or just your thoughts on the area.
Sure. I mean, I love the North Fork. I love the South Fork. I have ties to Montauk. I have ties to Southold. I realize that it's a really vibrant and important part of our community. And I think sometimes, because it is smaller than the west end of Suffolk County, that mm-hmm. people think that, they're sort of forgotten out here. I can tell you that from the DA's office, we have a robust East End bureau, and we take public safety out in the East End of Long Island just as seriously as we do in the West End. We've established great relationships with all of our various East End police agencies, and we're working. When I first started in 1992, it was different in the East End. They didn't have some of the gang issues. They didn't have the opioid and the drug issues that were more prevalent in the West End. Unfortunately, we're seeing that creep into the East End. So we're cognizant of that. We have the East End Drug Task Force, and we're going to make sure that we keep everyone out in the East End safe, and we want to be responsive to their concerns, and we work very closely with our East End jurisdictions to make sure we do that.
Lastly, I just ask people if there's any other things you'd like to say or discuss that we haven't talked about. I know we covered a wide range of things, but just any last minute things.
No, I don't think so. I would say to members of the public, visit my website, because there's a lot of information on the website. We have our press releases, which illustrate some of the work we have, but we also have areas for internships, employment opportunities. I will say the DA's office runs on the sweat of our citizens in Suffolk County. So we want our bright young people from Suffolk County to continue to live in Suffolk County and come work for us. And there's so many, it's not just being an investigator. It's not just being a prosecutor. We have a press, we have community outreach. We have victims' rights advocates. We have analysts, we have crime analysts, we have discovery expediters, we have paralegals. We have all sorts of different job opportunities. So come check us out.
Definitely. No, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast today and share your story and share all the wonderful work you're doing in the community and keeping Suffolk County safe. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 160 with Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.